My ex-wife caught me sitting alone at the train terminal, and then she walked up to me, and the first thing she said wasn't hello. 7 years since Delaney Voss stood across a courtroom from me and let a judge cut us in half. 7 years since I stopped being her husband and started being the man who took her father's money and walked away. Now I'm 41, a roofer with cracked hands and a duffel bag holding everything I still own, sitting alone on bench 14 at the Craven Street train terminal with a one-way ticket to nowhere and 11 minutes before it leaves. But she wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be 400 miles away, wearing black, burying the man who ended us. And she wasn't empty-handed when she walked up to me. She was holding a shoebox against her chest, like something alive inside it was still breathing. Then my ex-wife looked down at me sitting alone in that train terminal with rain in her hair and 7 years in her eyes, and asked me the one question I had signed my name promising I would never answer. She said, "Why does my father have 61 letters you wrote me?" I didn't move. I need you to understand what that felt like. It was like standing on a roof and hearing the wind change behind you. Everything around us kept going like nothing was happening. The old departure board clicked over, one letter at a time, that soft tapping sound, like rain on a tin roof. Pigeons shifting somewhere up in the iron rafters. A suitcase rolling past, loud, then quiet, then gone. And the smell of that place, diesel and wet wool and burnt coffee that had been sitting on the burner since noon. I had smelled that same smell on the 9th of October for 7 years straight. I had never once smelled it, with her standing in front of me. "Emmett," she said, "look at me." I looked at the floor. There's a crack in the tile down between my boots. It's shaped like a lightning bolt. I have looked at that crack more than I've looked at my own face in a mirror. "You're going to sit there," she said, "and say nothing." Again, her breath was coming uneven. 7 years? You didn't call? You didn't fight? You signed every piece of paper they put in front of you like you couldn't wait to be finished with me. She was right about the signing. She was wrong about all the rest of it, and I was not allowed to tell her so. I finally looked up. The rain was still beaded on the shoulders of her coat. Her hair was pulled back the way she wore it when she was holding herself together with both hands. There were lines by her eyes that weren't there before. She was 41 years old now, too, and she was still the most beautiful thing I have ever been allowed to stand near. "You're supposed to be at a funeral," I said. Her chin went hard. "So you heard." "The whole county heard, Laney." It just walked out of my mouth. Laney. 7 years of not saying it, and it came out like it still had a key to the house. Something crossed her face. Then it was gone. "Don't," she said. "All right. Don't say my name like that when you won't answer one question." The board clicked over. Track 4. The 742 to Kettering, connecting to everywhere else in the world. 11 minutes. Let me back up, because you need to know how a grown man ends up on a bench with his whole life in one bag. My father was Wendell Sayer. He put roofs on houses in that county for 31 years. He had a voice like gravel rolling in a bucket, and he could hold 3 nails in his teeth and still tell you a joke. He worked for Arthur Voss when they were both young men. Then he went out on his own, because he wanted his own name on the truck door. Sayer Roofing. He painted the letters himself, and got the S crooked, and my mother never once let him forget it. That crooked S is still the prettiest thing I have ever seen painted on anything. He used to say a roof is the only thing standing between a family and the sky. He said if you cheat on a roof, you're not cheating the man who hired you. You're cheating his kids while they're asleep. I was 28 the first time I saw Delaney. Hailstorm in April had torn the back porch roof off Arthur Voss's house, and Arthur hired my father's crew, because he liked keeping men in his pocket and because we came cheap. Second day. I was up on the ridge with a nail gun and the sun on the back of my neck. A woman came out the back door carrying a pitcher of lemonade and 4 glasses on a tray, and she hollered up at me, "Are you allowed to drink on the job, or is that a rule?" I said, "It's lemonade, ma'am." She said, "I know what it is. I made it." She taught 2nd grade. She pushed her sunglasses up on her head and then spent half her life looking for them. She talked to every dog she passed. She cried at commercials and then got mad at herself for crying at commercials. 3 months later, I asked her to marry me in a hardware store parking lot because I couldn't wait long enough to get somewhere nicer. She said yes before I finished the sentence. Arthur Voss didn't come to the wedding. He sent a check instead. My father tore it in half in the driveway. My mother hollered at him for an hour, and he stood there and took it, and then he said one thing. Ruth, I'd rather my son start out poor than start out owned. I have turned that sentence over in my hands for 7 years on a bench. We rented a house on Alder Street with a furnace that quit whenever it felt like it. In January, we slept under 4 blankets and my work coat, and Delaney used to say we were camping. In the morning, you could see your breath in that kitchen. We had a wedding photo in a $5 frame on the shelf by the door. She's laughing in it. I'm looking at her instead of at the camera. That was it. That was the whole life. 2 people, a bad furnace, and a $5 frame. I would give both my hands for one more cold morning in that kitchen. Then my father got sick. 8 months from the first cough to the last day. And here's what nobody tells you about a man dying. The paperwork doesn't wait for you to finish crying. He'd signed personally on everything. The trucks, the equipment loan, a line of credit he took out one slow winter to keep 3 men employed, because he could not stand the thought of Ray Tolliver's kids going without at Christmas. When he died, the debt didn't die with him. It came to me. $41,000. Then the interest. Then the lawyers. Then the envelopes with the red stripe. Then the phone calls at supper time. Then the phone calls at 7 in the morning. And then a letter with a word in it I had to go look up. Garnishment. I used the computer at the public library, because we didn't have one. And when I found out what it meant, I found out something else. They could come after her wages too. She was making $29,000 a year, teaching 7-year-olds how to read. I sat in my truck in that library parking lot and put my forehead down on the steering wheel, and I have never in my life been so scared. That was a Tuesday. On Thursday, Arthur Voss called my phone for the first time in 2 years. Meet me at the lamplight, he said. 6 o'clock. Don't bring my daughter. Back at the terminal, Delaney sat down on the far end of bench 14. Not close. The other end. The way you sit next to a stranger on a bus. She set the shoebox on her lap and laid both hands flat on the lid, like she was holding it shut. Do you know what I did last night? She said. No. I packed a black dress. I ironed it. I laid out Ellis's shoes. She stopped. Her mouth shut so fast I heard her teeth. I didn't know that name yet. It went past me like a car in the dark. I had everything ready, she said. And then I went in his hall closet for the suitcase, and this box came off the shelf and hit me in the face. She laughed. It was an awful sound. It hit me in the face, Emmett, like he threw it at me from wherever he is now. Her thumb kept moving back and forth on the cardboard. 61 letters, she said. Your handwriting. My name on every one. Stamps. Postmarks. So you actually mailed them. She turned her head and looked straight at me. And they're open. Every single one. Somebody slit them open and read them and put them back in the envelopes. The board clicked. He read them, she said. He read them, and he kept them, and then he sat in my kitchen at Thanksgiving and told me I was better off without you. The quiet after that was the worst quiet of my life. I read all of them, she said, standing up in his hallway, then sitting on the floor of his hallway. I missed my train. I missed my own father's funeral because of a box of paper. She pressed her fist against her mouth. So I came here instead, because in 11 of them, you told me where you'd be. And that is what took my legs out from under me, because I had written that, over and over, like a fool talking into a well. Bench 14, Craven Street, every October 9th. The 742 comes in at 742. If you ever want to know why, that's where I'll be. I had mailed those words into what I thought was pure black nothing. And she had come. 7 years late. But she had come. Why couldn't you just tell me? She said, and her voice broke wide open. 61 letters and not one of them says why. Because I checked. Before I mailed every single one, I read it 4 times to make sure I hadn't broken the agreement. I told her I missed her. I told her I was sorry. I told her I hoped the new place had a good furnace. I never once told her the reason. Emmett. She was crying now. Say something. Say anything. Tell me you never loved me. Tell me you took the money and drank it. Tell me you're a coward. I have invented 100 different men to hate for 7 years, and not one of them will hold still long enough. Laney, give me one true sentence. One. Her voice went up into the rafters, and the pigeons broke loose, and a woman by the vending machines turned around to look at us. And I sat there with my mouth shut, because 7 years ago, I put my name on a piece of paper that said if I ever told her, the whole thing came undone. Every dollar, every payment. The collectors would come back around, and this time, they would come for her. That was the deal. That was always the deal. Here is what happened at the Lamplight Diner. It smelled like bacon grease and lemon floor cleaner. There was a radio behind the counter, playing something with a steel guitar in it, turned down low. Arthur Voss was in the back booth with a cup of coffee he never drank. 61 years old then, silver hair, big shoulders starting to go soft. A class ring he turned around and around on his finger while he talked. I hated him. I want to be honest about that. I'd hated him since the check. He said, "Sit down, son." I said, "I'm not your son." He said, "No, you're not." And then he said, "Your father was a better man than me," and it killed him. That took the fight straight out of me, faster than an insult ever could have. He slid a folder across the table with 2 fingers. Everything was in it. My father's loans, account numbers, payoff amounts, current as of that morning. He'd had it for weeks. $41,612, he said, plus interest, plus whatever they tack on when they take you to court, which they will do in about 9 weeks. I'm handling it. You're not handling it. You're drowning politely. The waitress came and topped off his coffee, and he said, "Thank you, ma'am," real gentle, and then turned right back around and kept killing me. "They'll come for her wages," he said. "You know that. You already looked it up." I didn't ask him how he knew that. Men like Arthur Voss always know. "She's 29 years old," he said. "She'll spend 15 years paying off your daddy's mistakes. She'll work summers. She'll work doubles. And you'll watch her do it. And you'll hate yourself a little more every year. And one day she's going to look at you across a kitchen table and you'll see it in her face. And that'll be the end of it anyway. Here's the part I need you to understand. He wasn't cruel. If he'd been cruel, I could have fought him. If he'd sneered at me, if he'd called me trash, if he'd been the villain I wanted him to be, I'd have stood up and walked out of that diner and taken my chances with the lawyers. But he said it gently. He said it like a man who was sorry about it. He put his hand flat on the table near mine. "I can make it gone tonight," he said. "All of it, every cent. And what do? You let her go." The steel guitar kept playing. "You sign this." He laid a second paper on top of the first. "You don't contest anything. You don't ask her for a dime. And you never tell her why. Not in a year. Not in 10. You want her to think I quit on her. I want her free," he said. "How she gets there is between you and God." I looked out the window. It was getting dark. There was a kid in the parking lot, riding a bicycle in slow circles with no hands, around and around. And I thought about the crooked S on my father's truck. And I thought about Delaney's hands, how the tips of her fingers were already going rough from cold classrooms and grading papers at 11 at night, and how she never once complained about that furnace. And I thought, if I love her, I cannot let her get dragged under by a debt she didn't make. So I said, "One condition." He waited. "I'm not taking your money," I said. "It's not a gift. It's a loan. I pay you back every dollar, every month. And when it's paid, when it's all the way paid, I get to tell her." He was quiet a long time. "You'll never pay it," he said. "Watch me. It's $41,000, son. On roofer's wages." I said, "Watch me." And Arthur Voss looked at me across that table for about 10 seconds, and something moved behind his face that I did not understand at all. I wouldn't understand it for 7 more years, standing in a train station. He said, "All right." He wrote the condition in by hand at the bottom of the page, in that slanted handwriting of his. We both signed it. He shook my hand. I went out to my truck and sat in it for 40 minutes, before I could turn the key. I got home at 9 o'clock. She'd kept my dinner warm. She'd put a dish towel over the plate, to hold the heat in. She said, "Where were you?" And I said, "The first of 7 years' worth of things I'm ashamed of." I said, "Nowhere." The courthouse was 3 weeks later. I have thought about that hallway more than any other place on this earth. Green tile, a water fountain with a piece of masking tape over the button, a bulletin board with a flyer for a volunteer fire department fish fry. She wore a blue dress, not black, blue, because right up until the last minute, She still believed I was going to stop it. She stood in front of me and said, "Just tell me you don't love me. Say those words out loud and I'll sign." And my mouth said, "I don't love you." That is the biggest lie I have ever told. I hope somebody up there takes the circumstances into account. I doubt it. Her face came apart. Not all at once. That's what I can't get out of my head. It went in pieces. About 2 seconds. The eyes first, then the mouth, then everything. Like a roof letting go. She signed it. She handed the pen back to me. And she said one thing before she walked out of that building. "I would have worked 3 jobs for you, Emmett." She knew. She didn't know the details, but she knew the shape of it. She always knew me better than I knew myself. And I let her walk out of there, believing I picked money over her. Now I'll tell you about the 7 years. And I'll be quick, because there isn't much in them. I worked days on roofs for Dunham Exteriors, and any other outfit that would have me. Nights I stocked freight at the Perkins warehouse from 10 to 6. I slept in the afternoons. I lived in a room over Halbrook's hardware store, with a hot plate and a radiator that knocked like somebody was locked inside it. On the 11th of every month, I walked up Arthur Voss's driveway in the dark, and put an envelope of cash in his mailbox, and walked back down. 600 and change. Every time, I never knocked. Not once. That was mine. The one piece of dignity I had left. I'd pay him, but he was never going to see my face while I did it. Rain, ice, the flu, both surgeries on my shoulder. 84 times. And once a year, on October 9th, I bought a ticket for the 742 to Kettering. I never used it. I'd sit on bench 14 and watch that train fill up and pull out without me, and then I'd walk home. It cost me $31 a year to sit there and be a fool. The woman behind the ticket window was named Marguerite Doyle. Heavy-set, glasses on a chain, 22 years at that counter. By the 3rd October, she stopped asking me where I was headed. By the 5th, she'd just slide the ticket across and say, "Same one, hun?" And I'd say, "Same one." She never asked me why. I've thought about that a lot since. Some people know when a thing isn't theirs to open. The letters started the 1st December. I wrote them at the kitchen table in that rented room, on lined paper, in pen, because I never learned to type. And every one of them I read 4 times before I sealed it, making sure I hadn't said the one thing I wasn't allowed to say. I told her about the weather. I told her a customer's dog had puppies. I told her I hoped she was warm. 61 of them, over 5 years. Then, in the 6th year, I stopped. I want to be honest about why. It wasn't nobility. I stopped because a man can only shout down a well for so long before he starts to feel like a lunatic. Nobody ever wrote back. Nobody ever called. And after 5 years, I decided she'd thrown them away without opening them, which is what any sane woman would have done. That's what I believed on the night I walked into that terminal with a duffel bag. Because 11 days before, on October 11th, I had made the 84th payment. Paid in full. And here's the thing. Nobody warns you about paying off a debt that big. You think you'll feel light. You think there'll be a moment. There wasn't one. I walked back down that driveway and out to the road, and I stood there in the dark, and I realized I had nothing left to do in that town. Nothing was holding me anymore. Not the debt, not her, not my father who was in the ground. Just streets with her name on them, and a bench, and a woman behind a ticket window who'd been watching me be a fool for 7 years. So I sold what I had, and I bought the ticket for real this time. That's the man she found sitting there. Emmett. I came back to the terminal. She was standing again. The train was in. I hadn't even heard it come. Track 4. Brakes screaming. That big square of white light sweeping across the tiles and up the wall. Final boarding, the speaker said. That flat metal voice. Track 4. She looked down at the duffel bag at my feet. Are you really leaving? Yeah. Where? Kettering. Then wherever. Why now? And I couldn't answer that one either. Because the answer was, because 11 days ago, I finished paying for you. She stepped back like I'd shoved her. Okay, she said. Okay. I understand. She wiped her face fast with the heel of her hand, angry about it. He died Tuesday, she said. In his sleep. In his chair with the television still on. Lainey, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. He doesn't deserve. She stopped herself. Started over. He left me that box. and a note on top of it. One note. She reached into her coat pocket and took out a piece of paper, folded and refolded so many times already it had gone soft as cloth. 6 words, she said. She opened it. Ask him about the ledger. Every hair on my body stood up, because there were only 2 people alive on this earth who knew that word. And now there was one. I put my face in my hands. Emmett? Her voice dropped, and it was scared now. What ledger? The train hissed. Down the platform a conductor called something out and a door banged shut. 11 days ago, Arthur Voss knew he was dying. 11 days ago, he took my last payment out of his mailbox. And instead of carrying it into the ground with him, he put a shoebox where his daughter would find it. And left her a map to the truth with 6 words written on it. He can't do this to me, I said into my hands. Not now. Not after all of it. Do what? Emmett, do what? I stood up. She thought I was going for the train. I watched her decide it. I watched that woman's whole body get ready to be left behind again. And it was worse than the courthouse, because this time she wasn't even surprised. But I didn't go to the train. I reached inside my coat and took out the envelope I had carried, folded, against my chest, in every coat I have owned for 7 years. And I held it out to her. Take it. What is it? Just take it. Because Arthur Voss was dead. The man who wrote that agreement was in a box 400 miles from here. And there was a line at the bottom of it, in his own hand, that said when it's paid in full, he gets to tell her. Paid in full. 11 days ago, the old man let me out on his way through the door, and then he sent his daughter to come find me. She took the envelope. Her hands were shaking so hard she dropped the first thing that slid out of it. I bent down and picked it up off the tile and put it back in her fingers. It was a receipt. A little carbon copy from a cheap hardware store receipt book. 3 inches by 5. There were 84 of them in that envelope. Dated the 11th of the month. Every month. 7 years. 600 and change. Every single one. And every one of them signed in Arthur Voss's slanted handwriting. She went through them one at a time. Slow at first. Then faster. Then her legs quit working and she sat down hard on bench 14, with receipts sliding off her lap onto the floor. And an old man walking past bent down and gathered up 3 of them, and handed them back to her, and she never even saw him. What is this? She whispered. Emmett, what is this? I never took his money, I said. I took his terms. She looked up at me. Say that again. I never took $1 from your father. My voice came apart and I let it. He paid the debt off that same night. All of it. Straight to the creditors. And I paid him back. Every cent of it. Roofs in the daytime, freight at night. 7 years. 84 payments. No. October 11th. 11 days ago. I pointed at the one still in her hand. That's the last one. Read what he wrote on the back of it. She turned it over. I watched her eyes move. Paid in full. And underneath that, in handwriting that had gone old and shaky since the first one, tell her, I was wrong. A.V. She made a sound. I will hear on the day I die. It wasn't a sob. It was smaller than that, and 100 times worse. It was the sound a person makes when something that has been sitting on their chest for 7 years finally gets lifted off. And the lifting hurts more than the weight ever did. She bent over her own knees with those receipts crushed in both fists. He knew, she said. He knew, and he ate at my table. He held. She stopped so hard her teeth clicked shut. He sat in my house, she said, and he watched me. And he said nothing. He thought he was saving you. Don't you defend him. I'm not defending him. It came out louder than I meant it to. A woman at the ticket window looked up. I got hold of myself. I'm telling you, I did the exact same thing. She lifted her head. That's what I am, Lainey. I'm not better than him. I'm the same thing he is. I decided what you could survive without ever once asking you. So did he. 2 men who loved you, sitting on the truth like it belonged to us. I sat down next to her. Close this time. Every man in your life decided your life for you, I said. And you're the only one who paid for it. She was crying with her whole body now, but quietly, the way people cry when they've had a lot of practice at it. I told myself you were weak, she said. For 7 years. Every time it got hard, I'd take it out and use it. He was weak. He took the money. It was the only thing holding me up. I know. And it wasn't even true. No. She turned and looked at me, and her face was wrecked and wide open, and I could see all the way down. You said you didn't love me, she said. In that hallway. I know what I said. Was that a lie too? The board clicked over. Track 4. Lainey, I said. There has not been one single day. She put her hand over her mouth, and then she said, Emmett, sit still. There's something I have to tell you, and I need you to sit very, very still. Okay. When you signed those papers, she stopped. She was shaking so hard the receipts were rattling. 3 weeks after, she said. 3 weeks after that courthouse, I found out, and then a small voice, somewhere right down by my knee, said, Mom, they're out of the yellow ones. Mom, they're out of the yellow ones. I turned my head. There was a little girl standing right there, close enough to touch. Purple raincoat 2 sizes too big, sleeves hanging down past her fingers. White sneakers gone dark at the toes from the rain. A fistful of quarters held up in the air, like she was showing me evidence. 6 years old, maybe. Gap in the front where her teeth were coming in crooked. And her hair wouldn't lie flat on the left side. It came up off her head in one stubborn piece, right at the part, the way water does when it hits a rock. My hair does that. My father's did too. There's a thing that happens to a man when his whole life changes in 1 second, and I've never been able to explain it right to anybody since. It's not like getting hit. It's like getting switched off. The sound went first. The train, the pigeons, the announcements, all of it dropped away, like somebody pulled a plug out of the wall. Then my hands went numb. Then the light in that terminal got very bright and very slow, and I could see the dust moving through it, every single speck, floating. And in all that quiet, there was one small girl in a purple raincoat holding quarters. Ellis, Delaney said, and her voice came to me like it was underwater. Come here a second, baby. The girl came. She stopped in front of me and looked at me the way children look at people. Straight on. No manners about it at all. Why is he crying? She asked. Because he's had a long day, Delaney said. Ellis thought about that. Then she nodded, like she completely understood a long day, and she held her quarters out toward me. You can have these, she said, but not for the yellow ones, because they're all gone. I couldn't speak. I want you to know that I tried. I opened my mouth and nothing came out of it. And this 6-year-old stood there, being patient with me, waiting for a man who had never once seen her face to say something back. Delaney's hand landed on my wrist. Her fingers were freezing cold. Ellis Ray, she said. This is Emmett. Hi, said Ellis. Hi, I said. One word. It broke in half coming out of me. And Delaney leaned close to my ear and said the sentence that cut my life into before and after. She was born the June after. She's 6 years old. She has your mother's chin and your father's stubborn hair, and I have carried her by myself since the day she came. The speaker crackled over our heads. Final boarding. Track 4. The 742 to Kettering. Final boarding. Ellis looked up at the ceiling when the voice came on, the way kids do, like the sound is a bird up there. Delaney stood up fast and pulled her back by the shoulder. Not rough, just away from me. I watched her do it. I watched a mother move her child out of arm's reach of a man she had spent 7 years teaching herself to hate. That hurt worse than the courthouse. I want that on the record. Worse than the courthouse. I wasn't going to tell you, she said, fast and low. I need you to know that. I came here to scream at you about the letters and then get on a train and never see your face again. Lainey, I looked for you. Her whole face was shaking. When she was 2, I drove out to your mother's house on a Sunday with a baby asleep in the back seat, and I sat in that driveway 20 minutes working up the nerve. You went to my mother's? Ruth answered the door. Something cold went straight down through the middle of me. And she told me you'd moved away, Delaney said. She said she didn't know where. She said you'd started over, and it was better for everybody. The train hissed. Somewhere down the platform, a door slammed shut. Lainey, I said. I have never lived anywhere but this town. Not one day of my life. She stopped breathing. I watched it hit her. I watched her go back through 7 years and pick up every single thing and set it down somewhere different. That's not possible, she said. Alder Street until they sold it. Then the room over Halbrook's Hardware. 22 minutes from my mother's front door. No. 16 minutes from yours. If that's still the house on Fairbanks. She put both hands on top of her head, the way people do when they've just watched a car wreck happen. She lied to me, she whispered. Your mother stood in her doorway with my baby out in the car and lied straight to my face. Final boarding, the speaker said. And here's where the whole thing came down to about 9 seconds. I stood up. Delaney saw me stand, and something died in her eyes. I will never forget it as long as I live. She pulled Ellis in tight against her leg, and her chin came up, and she got that look people get when they've decided to be strong about a thing that's killing them. She thought I was going for the train. Of course she did. That's what men did to her. That's the only ending anybody had ever handed her. I picked up my duffel bag. Everything I owned in this world was inside it. 2 work shirts, a razor, a coffee tin of my father's old roofing nails I'd kept for no good reason at all, and a wedding photo in a $5 frame, wrapped up in a towel so the glass wouldn't break. I turned, and I walked 4 steps to the trash can by the pillar and I dropped it in. It made a hollow, ugly sound hitting the bottom. Delaney's mouth came open. Behind me, out on track 4, the doors chimed and rolled shut, and the 742 started to move. I felt the wind of it come through the open arch, and go up the back of my neck, and lift the hair there. I did not turn around. I will hear that train leaving without me for the rest of my life, and it is the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. Then I came back, and I got down on one knee. Not to propose. God, no. I hadn't earned the right to stand in the same room as that woman, let alone ask her for anything. I got down so I could be eye to eye with a 6-year-old. Ellis, I said, can I ask you something important? She nodded, very serious about it. Since they're out of the yellow ones, I said, what's the next best kind? She thought hard. She really did. She looked over at that vending machine, and back at me, and she said, the red ones. But not the sour kind. The sour kind makes my tongue feel like a cat. Okay, I said, I can work with that. And I stood up and looked over the top of her head at her mother. Delaney had both hands over her face. I'm not going anywhere, I said. She shook her head into her hands. Not tomorrow. Not next year. You can hate me the entire time. You can put me out in the yard and I will stand in the yard. But I am done being a man who decides things about your life without you in the room. She lowered her hands. I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight, I said. I'm not asking you to ever forgive me. But if there's a day, someday, when you want to, I'd like to be somebody you don't have to be brave about anymore. She didn't answer me. She crossed the 4 feet between us and put her forehead down on my shoulder, and her whole body came apart against me. And I didn't touch her, because I wasn't sure I was allowed to. Then her fist closed on the front of my coat and held on. Ellis got worried and wrapped both arms around our legs, because that's what children do when the grown-ups break. The 3 of us stood there in the middle of Craven Street Terminal, while strangers walked around us with their suitcases. Nobody clapped. It wasn't a movie. An old woman in a plastic rain bonnet went past and said, "Bless you all," to nobody in particular, and kept right on walking. And behind the ticket window, Marguerite Doyle, who had sold me a ticket on October 9th for 7 years running, and never once asked me why I didn't use it, pushed her glasses up on her forehead and cried into a paper napkin. She'd been wondering about that bench for 7 years too. The rain had quit by the time we got outside. The street was black and shining, and the streetlights were doubled in it. That good smell after rain, wet asphalt and cold air, and somewhere down the block the sweetness coming off a bakery vent. Delaney had a gray sedan with a car seat in the back, a school bag on the floor, and about 400 crushed goldfish crackers ground into the carpet. "Where's your truck?" she asked. "Sold it." "You loved that truck." "I know." She waited. 11 days ago, I said. I was $340 short on the last payment. She stood there, holding her car door with her mouth slightly open. "You sold your father's truck," she said, "to finish paying my father. It was the last one." Delaney looked up at the sky for a second, like she was asking somebody up there a question she already knew the answer to. Then she said, very quietly, "Get in." I did not go home with them that night. I want to be honest about all of it, including the parts that aren't pretty. She drove me to Halbrook's. It's 12 minutes. Nobody said a word the whole way except Ellis. who explained to me from the back seat that a hermit crab can change houses whenever it wants, and that she had 2 loose teeth, but only one of them was ready. When we pulled up, Delaney put the car in park and looked straight out the windshield. "I can't do this fast," she said. "Okay. I have spent 7 years building something to stand on, and you just kicked it out from under me in an hour. Okay. She doesn't know what a father is, Emmett. Not really. She's never had one, so she's never missed one. If you come in, and then you go," her voice went hard as a nail. "If you come in, and then you go, I will never forgive you. Not the way I didn't forgive you before. For real. I'm not going. Everybody says that." "Then don't believe me," I said. "Make me prove it. Take as long as you need." She turned and looked at me for the first time since we got in that car. "Tuesdays," she said, "and Saturdays. Public places. You do not tell her who you are. Not until I say, okay. And Emmett," her jaw was tight, "you need to go see your mother." Ruth Sayre lived in the same house she'd been in since 1979, with a porch light that had been burnt out for 6 years because she wouldn't let anybody up on a ladder except my father, and my father was dead. I got there at 11 o'clock at night on foot because I didn't have a truck anymore. She opened the door in her housecoat with one hand up at her chest. "Emmett, what in the world? Did Delaney come here?" She went still. 68 years old, my mother. Little, 5'1" in her shoes. And I watched the whole thing come up in her face at once, and I knew before she said a single word. "You need to sit down," she said. "Did she come here with a baby in the car? Emmett, did my daughter sit in your driveway?" Her hand came up over her mouth. I have never yelled at my mother in my life. I didn't yell then either. That's the thing about it. My voice went so quiet it frightened both of us. "Say it." She sat down on the arm of my father's chair, which nobody had sat in since the day he died, and she folded up like a paper bag. "Arthur Voss came to me," she said. The clock on her mantel ticked. Same clock my whole life. 2 weeks after the courthouse. "He sat right where you're standing now, and he told me what you'd agreed to. The debt, the payments, all of it. He said if that girl ever came looking, and the 2 of you got back together, the deal was broken. Every dollar came back due, and they'd come after her wages and yours, and you'd both go under. So you sent her away. She was standing on my porch, baby." My mother started to cry. She was standing right there, and she said, "Is Emmett here? I have something to tell him." And I looked past her at that car, and I saw the car seat in it. "You saw the car seat. I saw it. You knew. I guessed," she said. "God forgive me. I guessed. And I shut the door anyway." I had to put my hand flat on the wall. "Why?" "Because you'd made 40 payments by then." She said it like it was an answer. Then she heard it out loud, and her whole face crumpled. "Because I thought if I let her in, everything you'd been killing yourself for came apart in one afternoon. Because I was scared, Emmett. Because your father was dead, and I was scared, and that man sat in my living room and talked at me for 2 hours, and by the end of it I believed him. He wasn't your husband," I said. "He wasn't your family. He was a man with money, and you took his word over your own son's child." "I know it. She's 6 years old, Mama. I know it. 6 years, 6 birthdays, 6 Christmases. She lost her first tooth and I wasn't, and then I couldn't talk anymore. I sat down on my mother's hallway floor with my back against the wall, 41 years old, and cried like I was 10. She got down beside me. It took her a while, her knees being what they are. She put her hand on top of my head, the way she used to when I was small. "I've got one more thing to tell you," she said, "and then you can hate me for as long as you need to. Say it." Every year on her birthday, I bought a card. I lifted my head. "June 19th, she said. I didn't know her name. I wrote "Sweet Girl" on the inside of every one. They're in the drawer underneath the good tablecloths. There are 6 of them. I never sent a single one, and that is the sin I will carry into my grave. Nobody in my family ever knew how to do the right thing in the right order. We only ever knew how to love people wrong, and quiet, and too late. I stayed on that floor with my mother until about 2 in the morning. Somewhere in there she said, "Your father would have knocked that door down." And I said, "Yeah, he would have." And she said, "That's why I loved him, and that's why I've been so tired, ever since he died." The first Tuesday was at a dairy freeze out on Route 9. Delaney sat at the next picnic table over, with a paperback she never turned a page in. 12 feet away, close enough to hear every word I said. Ellis got a small vanilla with rainbow sprinkles and told me about a boy in her class named Denton who could burp the alphabet all the way to K. I said, "That's a real skill." She said, "It's not a skill, it's a problem." I laughed for the first time in a very long while, and I saw Delaney's head come up over the top of that book. The second Tuesday it rained, and we sat in the car in a park lot while Ellis narrated a 90-minute story about a horse that had no ending and possibly no middle. The third Tuesday, she asked me what I did for a job. I put roofs on houses. Why? Because a roof is the only thing standing between a family and the sky. She thought about that a good 10 seconds. "That's a good job," she said. And behind me, Delaney made a small sound. I found out later that's exactly what my father used to say to her, on that porch, the summer she and I met, before either of us knew what we were starting. Here's the part they don't put in the movies. It got worse before it got better. Because forgiveness isn't a door you walk through. It's a hallway. And it's long, and there's no light in it, and you have to go the whole way down it with your hands out in front of you. In November, Delaney let me come to the house on Fairbanks for the first time. Small place, yellow kitchen, crayon drawings taped up on every surface that would hold tape, and a bad roof. I saw it from the street before I saw anything else. Curling shingles on the south slope, and somebody's cheap patch job over the worst of it. Ellis went to bed at 8:30. Delaney and I sat at that kitchen table with coffee neither of us drank, and she told me the 7 years. I asked for it. I said, "Tell me all of it. Don't be kind about it." She wasn't. She told me she found out in a bathroom at the school, on a Tuesday, between second period and third, 3 weeks after the courthouse. She told me she sat down on that tile floor and laughed, because it was the funniest and cruelest thing she could imagine. She told me she taught right up until the day before Ellis came. She told me she went into labor at 2 in the morning and drove herself to the hospital, because she didn't want to wake anybody up, and that a nurse named Belinda held her hand for 6 hours, and she has sent Belinda a Christmas card every year since. She told me about the colic, 4 months of a baby screaming from 6 at night until midnight, and her walking that same hallway with one hand on the wall. She told me about the winter. The car died and she took the bus with a toddler in the snow. And then she told me the worst thing. "My father used to come over on Sundays," she said. "He'd sit in that chair right there and hold her while I did the dishes." I looked at the chair. "He'd hold her," Delaney said, "and he'd say, 'She's got a stubborn head of hair on her, doesn't she?'" I put both hands flat on the table. "He knew whose hair it was," she said. "He knew exactly whose hair it was. And he sat in my house and held your daughter and let me go on believing you didn't want us. Laney. And you know what's sick?" Her eyes were streaming, and her voice was flat as a board. "I was grateful to him. I thanked him. I told that little girl her grandpa was the best man in the world." We sat there a long time. Then she said, "There's something else." She got up and took a shoebox down off the top of the refrigerator, a different one, smaller, older, and set it in front of me. Her birth certificate. I opened it with my hands shaking. "Ellis Ray." "Ray?" I said. "Wendell Ray Sayer," she said. I dropped the Y. "I was 29 years old and furious at you, and I still could not make myself take your father out of her." That broke me clean in half at that yellow kitchen table, because I had stood at my father's grave with his debt in my pocket and thought, well, at least it ends with me. And it hadn't ended at all. His name had been walking around this town in a pair of light-up sneakers for 6 years. In December I fixed the roof. I didn't ask. That was probably wrong of me. But I didn't ask, because if I'd asked, she would have said no. I got up there on a Saturday at 7 in the morning with borrowed staging and a bundle of shingles I paid for by working 2 Sundays at Halbrook's, and I stripped that south slope down to the deck. The deck was rotten in 3 places. Somebody had shingled straight over it. Whoever did that took her money and put a bandage on a broken bone, and if we'd had one heavy snow that winter, that ceiling would have come down over my daughter's bed. I want to tell you what I felt when I saw that rot. It wasn't anger. It was shame, all the way down to the bottom of me. 7 years I'd been on roofs in that county, keeping strangers dry. Every day of it. Somebody's grandmother out in Millbrook, a dentist's summer place on the lake, and my own child had been sleeping under 3 feet of rotten wood the whole time. I replaced the deck. I flashed the chimney right. I ran new drip edge and fixed the gutter that had been pouring straight down onto the foundation. Delaney came out at noon with a cup of coffee and stood in the yard with her hand over her eyes, looking up at me. "How bad?" she said. "You want the truth?" "Always." "One more winter," I said. She didn't say anything for a minute. Then she said, "Come down and eat something." That's the whole scene. That's all it was. But it was the first time in 7 years I was allowed inside her house in the daytime. 2 nights later, I drove out to Arthur Voss's place. Alone. I didn't tell anybody I was going. I don't know why I did it. I told myself I was checking the roofline out of professional habit, which is a lie I told myself so I wouldn't have to say the real reason out loud. The house was dark. No car in the drive. A realtor's sign was staked in the yard, leaning a little from the rain, with a photograph of Arthur's own smiling face stapled to the corner of it. Because that's what they do now, apparently. They put the seller's face on it, even when the seller is dead. I sat on the tailgate of a borrowed truck and looked at that house a long time. "You son of a bitch," I said out loud, to nobody. The porch light wasn't on. Nothing answered. "You had 84 months to say it," I said. 84. I counted every one of them walking up that driveway. And you stood at that window and did arithmetic on your own daughter's life, like she was a debt too. The wind moved through the trees out behind the house. Somewhere, a dog barked twice and quit. "I hated you every single month for 7 years," I said. "And then you did the one decent thing at the very end. And now I don't know where to put it. It's got nowhere to go. You died before I could use it on you." I sat there long enough that my hands went numb in the cold. "You held her on Sundays," I said. "That was mine. That was supposed to be mine." Nothing answered, because nothing was ever going to. "I forgive you," I said finally. "I didn't mean to say it. It just came out, the same way her name came out of me on that bench. I don't want to. I'm not ready to. But I can see now that you were a scared man who never learned there's a difference between protecting somebody and owning them. My own mother did the same thing 2 weeks after you did. It isn't rare. It's just common. And it's ugly. I drove home in the dark, and I didn't tell Delaney I'd gone. Not for another year. When I finally did tell her, she just nodded and said, "I went out there myself in September. I yelled at an empty house too. I think we all needed to. And then in January, it all fell apart. It happened in a grocery store parking lot, which is where every important thing in my life seems to happen." Ellis was buckling herself into her seat. I was putting bags in the trunk. Delaney had run back inside for eggs, and Ellis said, through the open car door, in the most ordinary voice in the world, "Emmett, are you my dad?" I froze with a gallon of milk in my hand. "Because Marissa's dad picks her up on Tuesdays," she said, "and you come on Tuesdays. And Grandma Ruth has a picture in her hallway of a man, and he has my hair. I'd taken her to my mother's twice by then. Twice. And she'd walked down that hallway and looked at my father's photograph and worked out more in 11 seconds than every adult in her life had managed in 7 years. Children are not stupid. We just talk in front of them like they're furniture." "Ellis," I said, "that's a real good question. So is it yes?" And then I said the hardest sentence of my life. I said, "I can't answer that one by myself. That's a question you and your mom have to ask together." Her face went down. Just a little. A 6-year-old's face when a grown-up dodges. And she said, "That means no. Ellis, it's okay," she said. And she pulled the door shut. Delaney came out with the eggs and found me standing in that parking lot in the cold with my hand still up in the air like an idiot. She called me that night at 11, already crying. "She asked me in the bathtub," she said. "She asked me if you were her dad and if you didn't want her. Laney, she asked me if she did something. There is no pain like it. There is no pain in this world like watching a child take the failure of grown adults and put it on herself. I'm coming over." "No, Sharp. No, Emmett. Don't you come over here. I need to think. Then think out loud. Because I'm scared." "You want to know what I'm thinking?" Her voice climbed. "I'm thinking my father made a deal about my life in a diner booth. And you took it. And your mother shut a door in my face, and every last one of you had a reason. That's fair. I'm not finished, she shouted. And now I'm the one who has to decide whether to hand my daughter a father who might be gone in a year. And there's nobody making my decisions for me now, is there? Now it's just me. Now it's all mine. She was breathing hard. That's what the three of you left me with, she said. Not the 7 years. The weight. And she hung up on me. I didn't see them for 19 days. I know it was 19 because I counted every one. I worked. I ate standing up over the sink. I sat in that room over Halbrook's and listened to the radiator knock. And I did not call her, because she asked me not to. And because doing what that woman asked was the only thing I had left to give her. On the 20th day, a lawyer called my phone. Mr. Sayer, my name is Curtis Pham. I represent the estate of Arthur Voss. There's a document here with your name on it. I said, I don't want anything of his. He said, it isn't money, sir. It's a letter. And the instructions are very specific. It's to be read aloud, in one room, with his daughter present. We did it at that yellow kitchen table on a Thursday. Ellis was at my mother's. Delaney sat across from me, with her arms folded so tight, her knuckles had gone white. Curtis Pham took off his coat, laid it over the back of a chair, put on his glasses, and opened an envelope. And a dead man started talking. Delaney, Emmett, if Pham is reading this out loud, then I'm gone, and I did not have the courage to say any of it to your faces. Which will not surprise either one of you. I have started this letter 9 times. This is the 9th. Emmett, I want to begin with the ledger, because it's the only part of this where I come out looking like anything but what I am. I did not think you would pay me. I want that written down. When you sat across from me in that diner and told me you'd pay back every cent, I thought I was watching a proud boy make a promise to save his own face. I gave you 6 months. You made the first payment on the 11th of December, $604, cash, in an envelope, in my mailbox. And you didn't knock. The second one came in January. By the 9th payment, I had stopped being able to sleep on the 10th of the month. I want you to understand what that was like. Every month, for 7 years, a man I had ruined walked up my driveway in the dark, put money in my box, and walked away without a word. Every month, through both of my surgeries, through the year my wife's sister died, through weather that would keep a dog inside, I used to stand at that window and watch you do it. You never once looked up at the house. Delaney, I read his letters. I'm not going to explain that. There is no explaining it. I told myself I was checking to make sure he hadn't broken our agreement. After the first 6, I was reading them because I couldn't stop. And every one of them told me the same thing, that I had been wrong the night I sat in that diner, and that I was too proud to be wrong out loud. Here is the truth about what I did. I'd like it said plainly, because you both deserve at least one plain thing from me. I told myself I was protecting my daughter from a debt. I was protecting myself from a feeling. Wendell Sayer worked for me when we were young men. He was better at the work than I was, and he was a better man than I was. When he went out on his own, I told everybody in this county he would fail. I said it in front of people. I said it for 30 years. Then he did fail, and it killed him, and his son married my daughter. And when that boy sat down across from me, in the lamplight, with his father's debt on his back, I had exactly one chance to be a decent man. I could have paid it, and said nothing. I could have paid it, and called it a wedding gift. 7 years late. That's what a decent man does. I want you both to know I thought of it, right there at that table, and I let it go by. Because if I paid it as a gift, I'd be Wendell Sayer's rescuer. And rescuers get thanked once and then forgotten. If I paid it as a price, I'd own something. That's the whole reason. Not your wages, Delaney. Not the interest, not the law. A dead man beat me at being good, and I took it out on his son. Now the part I expect will end whatever's left between us. Delaney, the day you told me you were pregnant, I sat in my truck outside your house for an hour. I knew that afternoon that I had to undo it. I knew a child changes what a man is allowed to do. I did not undo it. I have held that girl in my arms on Sunday afternoons and felt her father's hair under my hand, and I have driven home and sat in my chair in the dark. Every month, the envelope came. Every month I thought, this is the one where I tell them. And every month I did the arithmetic. on what telling would cost me. My daughter, my granddaughter, the way people in this town say my name. And every month I chose myself. 84 times. That boy paid a debt 84 times. And I bought my own comfort 84 times. If there is a God, he is not going to have to say much to me. He can just show me the ledger. Emmett, the last payment came in on October 11th. I was at the window. You put it in the box, and then you stood in my driveway longer than usual, and I thought, he's going to knock this time. You didn't knock. You looked up at the house. First time in 7 years. And I stepped back from that window like a boy caught stealing, because I could not let you see me standing there. I wrote paid in full on your receipt and tell her underneath it, and I put that box where she would find it. Then I sat down in my chair, and here we are. So, Delaney, the house goes to you. Do whatever you want with it. And sell it. Burn it down. It's a house. The savings go to the child. And there's one more thing in the folder, which Fam will hand across the table now. Emmett, it's the agreement. The original. Both our signatures, and my handwriting at the bottom. I want you to have it, because I want you to be the one who destroys it. I don't want it shredded by a lawyer in an office. I want it torn up by the man who carried it. I have no right to ask either of you for anything, but I'm going to, because I'm past the point where it costs me. Don't waste it. Don't spend the next 7 years the way I spent the last 7. Don't stand at a window with your hand on the glass, doing arithmetic. Just knock on the door. Arthur Curtis Pham took his glasses off, folded them, and sat very still, the way decent men sit when they've been caught in the middle of something far too big for them. Delaney wasn't crying. That's what I remember most. She sat there with her arms still folded, absolutely dry-eyed, and she looked at the wall for maybe a minute and a half. Then she said, "Mr. Pham, would you excuse us?" He was out that door in 15 seconds. Good man. She got up, went to the drawer beside the stove, and came back with a box of kitchen matches and a metal cake pan. She put the agreement in the pan. "You do it," she said. I struck the match. "I want you to picture this. A yellow kitchen. Crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator. A dead man's voice still hanging in the air. And 2 people in their 40s standing over a cake pan, watching 7 years curl up into black paper." The smoke set off her smoke alarm, and she started laughing. This hard, shaking, half-crying laugh, and climbed up on a chair to hit the button and couldn't reach it. I reached over her head and hit it for her, and we were standing there like that, close, burnt paper and smoke all around us. She said, "Emmett." "Yeah, 19 days. I counted them too. You didn't call. You asked me not to." She put her hand flat on my chest. "That," she said, "is the first time in my entire life that a man in this family did what I asked him to do. We told Ellis on a Sunday. Delaney did most of it, because that was right." I sat down on the floor by the coffee table, because it felt wrong to be up on furniture for something like that. She said, "Baby, you know how you asked if Emmett is your dad?" Ellis said, "Yeah." She said, "He is." And Ellis said, "I know." 6 years old, sitting there with a marker in her hand. "I know," Delaney said. "How long have you known?" And Ellis said, "Since the picture in Grandma Ruth's hallway." Then she looked over at me, and her chin started going, and she said the thing that finished me. "Were you sick?" "What, baby?" "Marissa's dad went away because he was sick," she said. "Were you sick? Is that why you didn't come?" And I had to decide, right there on that floor, what kind of father I was going to be. The easy thing was to say yes, or to say something soft, something about how it's complicated, and grown-ups make mistakes. Instead I said, "No, I wasn't sick. Some grown-ups made a deal about you and your mom without asking her first, and I was one of them, and it was wrong. And it cost me 6 years with you. That's the truth. And you can be mad at me about it your whole life if you want to." Delaney's hand came up over her mouth. Ellis thought about it. Then she said, "Okay, but you have to come to the vegetable play. And that, right there, is the whole difference between children and adults. We spend 7 years building a fortress out of one hurt. They just want to know if you're coming to the play." I went to the play. She was a turnip. She had 4 lines. She delivered all 4 of them at a volume you could hear in the parking lot. She spotted me in the 3rd row and waved in the middle of somebody else's line, and I sat there and cried in a school gymnasium over a vegetable play, which is a humiliating thing for a grown man to do, and I would do it every night for the rest of my life. Afterward, out in the hallway where they were stacking the folding chairs, another father I'd never met said, "Which one's yours?" And I said, "The turnip." 4 words. I had to turn around and face a wall. That March, my mother had a fall. She'd gone out back to see about the gutter. The same gutter my father used to climb. The same gutter I had told her 100 times to leave alone. And she went down the porch steps on a patch of black ice nobody had salted. She lay out there 40 minutes in the cold before a neighbor's dog wouldn't stop barking at the fence, and somebody finally came around to look. Broken hip, a concussion, 3 days at Millbrook General before anybody would say for certain that she'd be all right. I sat in a plastic chair beside that bed every hour of it, listening to a machine beep, thinking about all the years my father wasn't there to make her go to the doctor sooner, and how she never complained about anything until it was already bad. I called Delaney on the second night, not to ask her to come, just because she was the person I called things to now. I heard her go quiet on the other end of the line. "I'm bringing a casserole tomorrow," she said. "Laney, you don't have to do that. I know I don't have to." She came the next afternoon with a dish still warm through the towel wrapped around it, and Ellis trailing behind her holding a construction paper card that said, "Get well, Grandma Ruth," in 6 different colors, 1 letter per marker, because she said plain writing was boring for a sick person. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. "You didn't have to come," I said again, because I didn't know what else to say. "She's my daughter's grandmother," Delaney said. Like that settled it, because by then, for her, it did. Ruth was gray and small in that bed, with a tube taped to the back of her hand. And when she saw Delaney standing in the doorway holding a casserole, she started crying before anybody said a word. "You should hate me," Ruth said. "I told God I'd understand if you never came." Delaney set the dish down on the rolling table very carefully, like it was the thing keeping her steady and not the other way around. "I spent a long time hating you," she said. "I practiced it in the car on the way over here, if you want to know the truth. I deserve that. Maybe." And then she pulled a chair up close. I watched her do it. I watched that woman choose, with her own 2 hands, to sit down beside the person who shut a door on her and her baby. "But I've got a 6-year-old out in that hallway who thinks the sun comes up out of your front porch," Delaney said. "And I am finished letting other people's fear decide who gets to be family in my house and who doesn't. I decide that now. Nobody else." Ruth reached out with the hand that wasn't taped, and Delaney let her take it. Neither one of them let go for a long time. "I bought her birthday cards," Ruth said. 6 of them. I never sent one. They're in my kitchen under the good tablecloths, and I want her to have every last one, even though they only say sweet girl on them. Because I never knew her name to write it. "She'll want them," Delaney said. "She keeps everything, that one. She's already got a shoebox of her own, and there's not one bad thing in it yet. And I intend to keep it that way as long as I have any say." That's when Ellis came around the privacy curtain with her card, and climbed right up onto the edge of that bed, careful of the tubes, because her mother had told her to be, and said, "Grandma Ruth, are you going to have a robot hip now?" And Ruth laughed so hard it must have hurt, and said, "I sure hope so, baby. I could use the upgrade." I stood in the doorway of that hospital room and watched 3 generations of women who had every reason on earth to walk away from each other. Choose, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, in a room that smelled like antiseptic and cafeteria coffee, to stay. I have built 100 roofs in my life. I have never built anything as strong as what got built in that room in about 4 minutes, with no tools and no lumber. Just 3 people deciding out loud not to let the worst thing anybody ever did be the only true thing about them. Ruth came to live with us for 6 weeks while that hip healed, on a rented hospital bed set up in what was supposed to be my office. Ellis appointed herself head nurse, complete with a paper hat, and read to her grandmother every night out of a chapter book about a horse, 1 page at a time, sounding out the hard words. Ruth never once told her to hurry up. Spring came. I got hired on as crew lead at Dunham Exteriors, steady hours. A truck that wasn't mine but had my name on the door magnet. I moved out of the room over Halbrooks into a duplex 4 streets over from Fairbanks, because Delaney said, and she was right, that a girl shouldn't have to watch her parents figure it out in real time under one roof. We did it slow. Tuesdays and Saturdays became Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, Sundays. And then it became me fixing the garbage disposal on a Wednesday, because who else was going to? I learned that Ellis is afraid of the dryer buzzer and always has been. I learned she will eat anything shaped like a triangle. I learned she can name 11 kinds of construction vehicle and gets genuinely angry if you call a backhoe a digger. I learned that Delaney still loses her sunglasses on top of her own head. And I learned, slowly, that a woman who has carried everything alone for 7 years does not know how to put anything down. You have to stand there for months with your hands out, and every time she flinches, you keep standing there. And then one day, she hands you the laundry basket without even thinking about it, and you understand you just crossed a bridge that took 8 months to build. It happened in June. Grocery store, cereal aisle, Ellis hanging off the end of the cart. She pointed and said, "Dad, can we get the one with the marshmallows?" Then she stopped dead. The word was already out. She heard it herself. She went stiff, and her eyes came up at me, scared, like she'd knocked something off a shelf in a store. And I said, without missing a beat, "The marshmallow one? Absolutely not. That's a scam. That's $4 of air." And she said, "It is not," and swung off the cart and started arguing about it. And the whole thing rolled right on past, exactly the way it was supposed to. In the truck afterward, Delaney reached across the seat and took my hand. She didn't say anything. She held it for 11 minutes, the entire way home, while Ellis sang something in the back seat. And I drove with one hand and looked straight ahead at the road, because I did not trust my own face. That was the day. If you ask me when it turned, that was the day. I asked her to marry me on October 9th. Same terminal, same bench. I planned it badly. I bought the ring on layaway from a man named Sal, who sold me a plain gold band, and told me a long story about his own divorce that I did not ask for, and will never forget. We brought Ellis. She thought we were going to watch trains, which was a thing we did sometimes by then. We sat down on bench 14 at 7:20. Marguerite Doyle was at the ticket window, 22 years at that counter. When she saw the three of us come in together, she put her hand over her mouth and turned around and pretended to file something. I said, "Lainey, do you know what today is?" She said, "October 9th. She'd known for a while by then. The board clicked over. Track 4, the 742 to Kettering. And I said, "For 7 years I sat on this bench and watched that train go. And every year I told myself, if she ever comes, I'll have something ready to say." "Do you?" "No," I said. "I've got nothing. 7 years and I've got nothing." She laughed, and it turned into a sob halfway out. I'm no good with words. And the last time I said something important in a building like this, I lied, I said. "So I'm just going to ask." And I got down on that dirty tile floor, right beside the crack shaped like a lightning bolt, the one I'd stared at for 7 years, and I asked her. She was nodding before I finished. Same as that hardware store parking lot. Same exact woman. Ellis screamed loud enough to scare the pigeons out of the rafters. And out on track 4, the 742 pulled in, sat there with its doors open for 4 minutes, and left without us. Marguerite Doyle sold 5 tickets that night and cried through every single one of them. We got married in April, on a Tuesday. We did it in the terminal. You can do that, it turns out, if you ask the right people and you don't need much. 12 folding chairs. A borrowed sound system nobody used. A pastor named Reggie Mott, who did it for free and told a joke about trains that didn't land. My mother wore a hat. She held both of Delaney's hands before it started and said something I never asked about, and Delaney kissed her on the cheek. Whatever that was, it belonged to the two of them. Ellis carried the rings in a coffee can she'd decorated herself with construction paper and roughly 200 stickers. She lost one of the rings, right in the middle of it. It came out of the can, hit the tile, and rolled. And 11 people in dress clothes went down on their hands and knees in a train station. A man waiting for the 6:15 found it under the radiator and held it up over his head like he'd won something, and everybody cheered. She told that story to anyone who would hold still for the next 2 years. We stood in front of bench 14. I'd had a brass plate made at the trophy shop, and I put it on there myself with 2 screws. The station manager walked past it 4 times and decided he hadn't seen anything. It's small, you'd miss it if you weren't looking. It says, "For the ones still waiting." She came back. That December, our first one, all under the same roof. Delaney put up a real tree for the first time in 8 years. She said a fake one was easier to manage alone, but a real one was worth the mess if there were enough hands to clean it up. We strung the lights wrong and had to do the whole tree over. Ellis sat on the floor sorting ornaments into piles by color, dead serious about it. My mother came for dinner and brought the 6 birthday cards tied up in a ribbon. She gave them to Ellis all at once instead of one a year. Because, she said, some debts you don't stretch out. You pay them in full the first chance you get. Ellis read every one out loud at the table. Sweet girl, in Ruth's careful hand. 6 times over. 6 different years. By the 4th one, Delaney had to get up and stand at the sink with her back to the room for a minute. I let her have that minute. Some things a person needs to feel alone, even in a house full of people who love her. After dinner, Ellis asked if she could put the star on the very top, and I lifted her up onto my shoulders to do it. She had to lean out further than either of us was comfortable with, and Delaney stood underneath with both hands up, like she could catch us from 6 feet away, laughing and terrified at the same time. The star went on crooked. Nobody straightened it. Not that year. Not any year since. That same star is in a box in our attic right now. Every December, Ellis climbs up and gets it down herself. It still doesn't sit right. It still doesn't get fixed. I'm 48 now. Ellis is in the 8th grade. She's tall. She's got a mouth on her that comes straight from her mother and a stubborn piece of hair on the left side that comes straight from a man she never got to meet. She wants to be an engineer. Bridges, specifically. She says roofs are fine, but she wants to build the thing that gets people across. Delaney teaches 4th grade now. She still cries at commercials. She still gets mad at herself about it. We sold Arthur's house and put every dollar of it in an account with Ellis's name on it. I've made my peace with that. Most days, the truck says Sayer and daughter on the door. I painted those letters myself, and I got one of them crooked on purpose. Ellis noticed in about 4 seconds. She said, "Dad, the S is crooked." I said, "Yeah, it is." And she looked at me for a second, and then she said, "Like Grandpa's." She has never seen that truck. She's only ever seen a photograph in a hallway. But she knew. Every October 9th, the 3 of us go down to Craven Street. We sit on bench 14 and watch the 742 come in. We don't do anything special. Delaney brings coffee. Ellis complains about the coffee and comes anyway. We sit there and watch those doors open and close, and watch that train pull out without us. And every single year, when it goes, I feel that same wind come up the back of my neck. Marguerite retired. There's a young man at the window now who thinks we're strange and is polite about it. Last year, Ellis asked me to tell her the whole story, start to finish. No skipping the bad parts. She was 12. We were driving home from a bridge, of all things. She'd wanted to see the new one going up over the Kettering line, all girders and cable, and she stood at that fence 20 minutes just watching the crane swing. On the way home, she went quiet in the way she does, right before she asks something real. "Tell me about the letters," she said. "All of it. Even the parts that make you look bad." So I did. The whole 40 minutes home. And then sitting in the driveway with the engine off, because neither of us wanted to walk inside in the middle of it. I told her about the diner and the smell of bacon grease. I told her about signing that paper. I told her about the word I said in the courthouse hallway that wasn't true. I told her about 84 payments and my father's crooked letters and her grandfather's slanted handwriting on a receipt pad. I did not leave out the part where I sold my father's truck for the last $340. And I did not leave out the part where my own mother stood in a doorway and lied to her mother with a baby out in the car. She sat with it a while. Then she said, "So basically everybody was trying to protect somebody, and it just made everything worse." "Basically. That's a terrible plan," she said. "It is. You should have just told the truth." "I know it. Even if it was scary. I know it, Ellis." She looked out the windshield at our own house. Porch light on. Her mother's shadow moving behind the kitchen curtain. "I'm glad you told me now, though," she said. "The true way. Even the parts that make you look bad. And that's the only reason I'm telling any of this to you at all. Here's what I know, and then I'll let you go. Love doesn't usually die. It gets decided against. Somebody decides for you. Out of fear, or pride, or love that came out crooked. And they don't ask you first. And then the years pile up on top of it like snow on a roof, until you can't even see the shape of what's underneath anymore. Both of the men who loved that woman decided her life for her in the same year. One in a diner booth, one in a courthouse hallway, and both of us thought we were being strong. We weren't being strong. We were being scared, with our chests puffed out. There's a difference. And it took me 41 years and one dead man's letter to learn it. I think about Arthur Voss more than I ever thought I would. Not with the hate I carried for 7 years. Not quite with forgiveness either. Most days. Somewhere in between. A man who loved his daughter enough to ruin 7 years of her life, protecting her from a debt. And who loved her enough, at the very end, to hand her the truth instead of taking it into the ground with him. Both of those things are true about him. I've stopped trying to make them cancel each other out. So if you take one thing from a roofer with cracked hands, take this. Tell the truth to the people you love, even when it costs you. Especially when it costs you. Because a secret kept out of love still rots the house from the inside. And by the time anybody notices, it isn't the shingles that are gone. It's the deck underneath. And if you ever get a second chance, if some ordinary Thursday, in some ordinary place that smells like diesel and rain, somebody walks up and says your name the way they used to say it, miss the train. Miss it on purpose. You can always buy another ticket. You cannot always buy another October 9th. Now let me ask you something. Before you go, somewhere in your life, there is a person you stopped talking to. And you've got a reason. A good one. You've had years to polish it smooth. But here's the question I want you to sit with tonight. Are you protecting them, or are you protecting yourself from finding out you were wrong about them all along? Because I carried my reason for 7 years. My mother carried hers. Arthur carried his all the way into a grave. And every single one of us was sure, absolutely sure, that we were being kind. If this story reached you, tell me in the comments, who is the one person you'd sit down on that bench and wait for? And what would you finally say to them if they walked up?